Everything had gone, as well as she hoped for Marjorie's name day, as well as could be expected. The gifts she got were incredible. The one from John was especially thoughtful. Olenna had been stunned at the accuracy of the drawing. How he had managed to draw it that small was something she was amazed by. The gift Sansa had given her, too, was unexpected. It had taken her a few moments to realize the outline of the white wolf embroidered into the fabric. But while she had enjoyed the feast, she had also found things which annoyed her during the night. Also, one of them, in particular, being the arrival of Renly Baratheon. It had taken her only a moment to see it, to see why he had come, her son being his usual subtle self, making it all too clear. Why he had thought that she'd countenance such a thing was beyond her. Was he really that stupid? She almost laughed at the thought. Of course he was. So she sat in her sofa the next morning and waited for first her son and then the stag. She'd deal with both before moving on to the other person who had almost spoiled her enjoyment of the feast, Randyll Tarly. Knowing her plans for the man's son was the only reason she had not called him out for his attitude the night before. The boy may be fat, he may even be craven, but how his father treated him was unacceptable. "Mother, you wished to see me," Mace said, smiling as he walked into the room. "Take a seat, Mace," she said, her voice leaving no room for doubt that she was annoyed with him. "Mother," he said shakily now as he sat down. "What were you thinking, Mace?" "Mother," he said, coolest as ever. "Renly Baratheon." "Mace, don't think I don't know you invited him." Mace? "I wished for him to meet Marjorie, Mother, to see her, perhaps in time, once she was older. Of course a match could be made, he is the king's brother after all," he said, looking to her. "What did I tell you, Mace? We will not be looking to match Marjorie to that family, am I understood?" "But Mother, they are the royal family. I thought you wished a match with them. I was just trying to help." "How close is Renly to his brother Mace? To Joffrey? He brings us no advantage whatsoever. None, Storm's End." "You think I'd send Marjorie to Storm's End?" she asked, and he mumbled something. "What did you just say?" she said, glaring at him. "Lay, better than marrying my daughter to a bastard," he said, as she'd have admired how he looked at her if she wasn't so annoyed. "Jon Snow is perhaps the most advantageous match any lady could have, Mace. Given what that boy has already accomplished, what he could accomplish in the future, there is no one in this land more advantageous, do you understand?" she said, and he shook his head. "I'll not marry my daughter to a bastard, Mother. I draw the line there. I'll not be moved on this," he said, and she almost laughed. She knew there was a backbone in there somewhere. She'd have never guessed this to be the hill he'd die on. "Neither would I, Mace," she said, and he looked at her confused. "I don't understand," he said a moment later. "Indeed, but that's beside the point. I have a match in mind for Marjorie, a good one I've no doubt you'll approve of. Do you believe me?" she asked, and he nodded. "I do, Mother. I just worried, but yes, I believe you." "Then you'll not try this again?" "No, Mother," he said, and she smiled at him. "Nor will you raise any objection to Jon Snow spending time with Marjorie, will you, Mace?" He once again looked at her confused, before nodding when he got up to leave. She'd love to tell him the truth, love to be able to confide in him. Olenna knew how he'd take it. He'd be overjoyed. The idea of Rhaegar's son, the idea of Jon himself. Not to mention the dragons, but it couldn't be. He'd never be able to keep it to himself. So she sighed as he left and sat back waiting for Renly Baratheon to come to speak to her. Something wasn't right about his arrival. Something was off, and she would get to the bottom of it. She didn't have long to wait. When he came in, she looked him up and down. His brother was a fat, drunken whoremonger. His other brother a dour, rigid man. Renly was charming to a point, well-dressed. He conversed well, presented well. Had it not been for his proclivities, in another life he may even have worked as a match for Marjorie, but her rose would grow far stronger and rise far higher than Lady of Storm's End. He had made a request to take Loras to Squire. Not long after she had decided to send him to Jaime Lannister, looking at him now, and given who Jon Snow turned out to be, she was glad she had turned it down. Now, though she needed to find out who apart from her idiot son had been whispering in Renly's ear, for someone surely was. "My lord, please take a seat. Would you like a drink? Some refreshments?" she said as charmingly as she was in the humor to pretend to be. "I thank you, my lady, but I've been well looked after. Some water, perhaps," he said. And she nodded to her servant to bring some, and once done turned to the man. "I was surprised to see you come all this way for my granddaughter's name day, my lord." "Really, my lady? I would have expected Lord Mace to have informed you I was coming," he said, half a smirk on his face. "He did, my lord, but I was speaking more of the fact you came at all, not on your arrival itself. The Reach and the Stormland share borders, my lady. I feel we should in time seek to have a much closer relationship." "As do I, my lord. It can only be beneficial for us to do so, but my granddaughter's name day feast hardly seems like something the Lord of the Stormlands would bother attending, not when we shall no doubt be having another tourney at some point in the future." "Normally it would not, my lady, but I found that I had both the time and inclination. And your granddaughter is such a charming girl, I have long wished to meet her." She looked at the smile on his face, the way the words rolled from his lips. Someone was definitely pulling his strings. "But who?" "I am most pleased you came. Perhaps we can discuss some trading opportunities between our two regions." "My lord?" "I would very much enjoy that, my lady. However, it seems I must cut my visit short. Events forced me to travel back to Storm's End. Perhaps I can have my steward draw up a proposal, or you can have your own present one." "Of course, my lord. Then I shall keep you no longer. I wish you a safe journey home, Lord Renly." "I thank you, my lady, both for the welcome and for the opportunity to speak more in the future. I look forward to it." She was annoyed when he left. Her probing had gone nowhere. Renly was not that good a player of the game. Had he been, she'd have heard of it by now. No. Someone was pulling his strings. Someone sending him and Mace had played into their hands. She would need to speak to Willis. Perhaps even the Lannisters on this. But never mind. It was time for lunch, and she hoped Lady Melissa was agreeable to her plans. Highgarden, 294. AC, Sam. The library at Highgarden was so much more expansive than their own. The sheer number of books was mind-boggling. He had come here after breaking his fast, glad his father was busy sparring with Dickon and others. But he couldn't even imagine where to begin. They wouldn't stay long, another day or so, and then it would be back to Horn Hill, so the larger volumes were out. Moving through the aisles, he picked up book after book. He replaced ones he'd chosen when he found another, which he was more drawn to. Books on the stars, on sailing, on metal craft, but it was the books on history he found the most fascinating. Surprisingly to him, they had books on the Gardener Kings here, books on the other houses of the Reach too, but it was the books on the Targaryens that he kept taking and putting back, trying to decide which one to read. "No thing come back," a voice called, and he turned and gasped, moving back as he was faced with a monster. "Please, don't eat me," he said, falling to the ground. "Fang, come here." The voice said more loudly now, and the wolf moved from him. "Are you well?" the voice said. Sam looked up to see a rather tall young girl standing there, her hand in the wolf's fur holding it back. He looked from her to the wolf, and back, shook his head, and the girl looked to the wolf herself then. "See, Fang, That's why you shouldn't run off on your own. You scared poor. I'm sorry, my lord. I've been rude. What's your name? The girl asked. Samwell Tarly, Sansa Stark, my lord. Lady Sansa, forgive me, he said, struggling awkwardly to his feet. No, my lord. It was my fault. Well, Fangs, she said, looking to the wolf admonishingly. What's that you're reading? A history of the conquest written by Maester Orlas, he said as she looked more closely at the book. It's a good book. My brother read a copy just recently. Your brother's here, my lady? He asked, eager to meet another reader. No, John is in Casterly Rock, she said, her voice a little sad. Jon Snow is your brother. His mind making the connection more quickly now. Aye, he is, she said, looking at him, almost daring him to say something untoward about her brother. I met him once in Old Town, him and his wolf. Wait, is Fang? Is he one too? Is she a direwolf too? Aye, she is. Sansa. There you are. I wondered where you'd gotten off to. Ah, I see you met Sam, Marjorie said from the door of the library. Lady Marjorie, forgive me, I meant no harm, he said, stumbling over his words when he saw the Rose of Highgarden. It's quite all right, Sam. So what are you two up to? She said, smiling, her eyebrow raised. We were just talking about Jon. Sansa said with a pretty smile, he thought. And direwolves, he added to laughs. He was surprised when Marjorie took a seat, and Sansa did likewise, looking at the two of them. He didn't know if he should sit or leave, but both Fang pushing him towards the table and the girls telling him to sit left him with no choice. He was surprised how eager Lady Marjorie was to speak to him, though he knew she was friends with Jon, and since they were speaking of him and Ghost, perhaps he shouldn't have been. He could have stayed there all day, he found, as both Marjorie and Sansa seemed far cleverer and better read than he'd have thought. But unfortunately, a servant came and informed him his father was looking for him. So after saying his goodbyes, he made his way to the guest wing and prepared to face his father. When he got there, he was glad to see his mother waiting with him, along with Lord Willis, who he had liked when he got the chance to speak to him, which wasn't much. Ah, Samwell, it's good to see you again, Lord Willis said. He smiled and nodded at the man. You too, my lord. Samwell, come. Take a seat. Lord Willis has some news he'd like to share with you, his mother said, while his father glowered at both he and her. Samwell, my grandmother and your mother have been discussing your future. It seems you're more inclined to knowledge than swords. Is that true? Lord Willis asked. He looked from his mother to his father, one nodding and smiling encouragingly, the other very much not. I am my lord, he said, hearing his father snort. Perhaps then it is that you should base your choice on then? Lord Willis said as Sam grew more confused. Choice, my lord? Lady Olenna has graciously offered to sponsor you to go to the Citadel, Sam, to study with the Maesters. Perhaps, should you wish to, you could become one yourself one day. Said, her smile beaming now. A Maester. Kim, the Citadel. This must be a dream, right? Any minute now he'd wake up and find he'd been hit over the head during the spar or fallen off his horse like last time he attempted to joust. His father wouldn't go for this. Surely, he thought, looking at him, and he could see the look he gave him, proving him right. But it must be a possibility, mustn't it? Otherwise, Lord Willis wouldn't be here. His mother wouldn't be smiling. I think I'd like that very much. he said, and his father stood up and walked from the room. "I shall inform my grandmother Samwell. I'm sure she'll be most pleased, my lady Samwell," Lord Willis said before leaving a moment later. He turned to his mother. He had to know. Was this for true? Was he actually going to be allowed, be a maester? His father had refused him when he asked to be sent there, said it was no place for a man and not for a son of his. But something had changed. What it was he didn't know, but he was glad of it. "Mother, is this for true?" "It is, if it's what you wish, my love," she said, and he nodded vigorously. "It is, mother. It very much is," he said, and she smiled when he hugged her. That night dinner was awkward. His father made snide comments of how a real man wields sword or lance, not books. How knowledge, unless it was knowledge of fighting a battle and being a lord, was useless. Sam refused to point out that his father relied on Arden for most things, or that Jon Snow had shown just how valuable knowledge could be. His brother seemed happy for him, though whether that was because of Sam's own happiness or because he now knew he'd be getting Hornhill, he wasn't sure. But he decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, hoping he cared enough about him that it was the former. The next morning he met with Lady Olenna, and while he was scared to be in the room given how frightening she usually was, he found himself more grateful than nervous for once. "I hope you enjoy yourself while you're there, young man. Gather what knowledge you can. Who knows, maybe someday you can help us as we've helped you." "Anything, my lady. Anything I can do to thank you for this opportunity, I'd be more than eager to," he said genuinely. His father wished for him to be sent directly, but his mother wouldn't allow it, so he returned to Hornhill and got to spend some time with his sisters, got to say a proper goodbye. A few weeks later, as the carriage left, the escort of men sent to take him to Highgarden, more a show of his father's standing than any worry of dangers of the journey or for him. He looked back at his home wondering when he'd return, thinking of the few good memories he had there, of his mother, his sisters, of Dickon, before he spent all his time with their father. He found he'd missed the people, not the place, the family, not the keep, that he thought was the main difference between him and his father. His father cared for the name, for how people saw them, for Hornhill, for their lands, but never for the family who lived there. Sam knew his father wouldn't even notice he was gone, wouldn't spare him a thought while he was at the Citadel. He found, though, that for now at least he cared not. Casterly Rock, 294 AC, Satin. He had been given a room far better than any he had ever stayed in, eaten far better than he ever had, other than when someone else bought him a meal, even been given coin to buy clothing. But none of that compared to being trained beside the others. Seeing Loras wield a blade was incredible to him. Seeing Brienne and Cregan spar just mind-blowing. His own skills were terrible. He'd never trained, never wielded a sword. He could use a dagger he knew if needed, and seemed to have some talent with a bow. But with a blade, he felt awkward, uncomfortable, and if it wasn't for Ser Deron and Loras, he would have walked away. But the knight was patient. He didn't shout or scream. He just showed him the way to hold it, and gave him little exercises to do to get better. Loras actually took the time to spar with him using wooden swords, showed him how just crashing the sword against a training dummy would help him. In the few weeks he'd been here, he'd gone from a useless swordsman to a terrible one, to one who was average. He had still felt like he wasn't improving until Jon showed him how easy it was to train, how to learn without attacking, without defending, to simply watch and copy. Look at Loras, at Brienne. Watch their feet. Satin, their stances. Watch how Cregan moves. Then when you're on your own, try to match it. Try to be like them. But I won't be able to be like them, he said sadly. No, but by trying, you'll end up being like you, Jon said. So he had done so. In his room at night, he had stood in front of a looking glass and gone through movements, stances, twists, and turns. He'd moved forward and backward. In training afterward, he had done the same things, and surprisingly, he'd even managed to get a hit in here and there. Seeing Loras smile at him when he did so, or John patting him on the back, made him feel prouder than he'd known he could feel. So he began to watch more and more. Sir Daeron, Sir Walder, and Sir Jorz, Loras, Brienne, and Cregan, all of them had their own styles, and he copied some from each of them. But watching John move was unlike anything else he had ever seen. His twists and turns, his spins, how he would seem to be there and then not. It was awe-inspiring, and not just to him. "How does he do that?" he asked Loras. "I wish I knew," Loras said, laughing. There was no doubt John was ahead of them. Cregan, Loras, and Brienne were so close to each other, it was hard to know who'd win each day. But John could take them all. So when he sparred against him and beat him, he knew something was wrong, something was off. But John wasn't speaking, wasn't talking, and if he wasn't to Loras, then he certainly wouldn't to him. His other lessons were more of the educational kind, and while he could read and write and had some learning, here again he was out of his depth. The fact he had to learn with Cregan and Joy was, he would think, embarrassing, if not for the fact that both were far ahead of him too. Cregan actually shouldn't even be here, but they were learning more of Westeros' houses, and on that subject, he was almost as clueless as Satin. Almost. "A red stallion on a golden shield," Liara asked. "How's Bracken?" Joy said when neither he nor Cregan could answer. "Tell me something interesting about their house," Liara asked, and this time it was Cregan who answered. "Aegor Rivers, Bittersteel, he was a Bracken," Cregan said, and both Joy and Liara smiled at him. "A flock of ravens on a scarlet field surrounding a black shield and a weirwood. House Blackwood," he said to everyone's surprise. "Very good, now tell me something interesting about them," Liara said. "Bloodraven, he was one of them," he said, and Joy and Cregan looked to him. He didn't tell them how he'd known this, of the old woman who lived in the Undercity and how each time he'd go there, she'd repeat that rhyme. How, when a couple of boys had come to the brothel wearing the sigil, he had found it interesting enough to ask one of the acolytes about it. Instead, he welcomed that they seemed happy that he was learning, and left it at that. While he didn't have page or squirely duties here, he, along with Brienne and Cregan, did act as squires for the three knights. Brienne, unsurprisingly, was drawn to Sir Walder and Cregan to his uncle. Satin found himself working for Sir Jorz, which sometimes meant he'd get to follow him around, though he was never allowed into his quarters, nor was Brienne into Sir Walder's. "Come on, Satin, you must come," Loras said, taking him out of the monotony of cleaning armor. "Why can't someone else go with you?" Brienne is in lessons. Cregan is spending time with his mother, and John is, Loras. "What? It's nothing. Come on, you know you want to," Loras said, and he laughed. He was right. Going riding would be much more fun than this. "Fine. Then at least you can help me finish." He smiled as Loras picked up a cloth and the breastplate and began cleaning it. In no time at all it was done, and so they went down to the stables. He still chuckled at Loras's horse's name, Bluebell, though he did so inwardly now, as Loras hadn't been too pleased to see him. So do outwardly. They mounted up, and with Loras's guards they rode out the gates of Casterly Rock. He was new to riding and was still getting comfortable doing so. He knew he was nowhere near as good as Loras was, and apparently Joy and John were even better. But he enjoyed it, liked it, and was glad for the opportunity to learn. They rode over some hills to a small stream before dismounting and allowing the horses to drink. He watched as Loras threw a stone over the water, saw that he seemed upset over something. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" he asked. "It's John. I don't know. Something is bothering him. He won't tell me, won't tell anyone. I wish Marjorie was here." "Your sister. Why?" "Marjorie," John would tell. Loras said, a soft smile on his face. Maybe you should write to her. Tell her, he said. And Loras shook his head. Are you mad? She'd be back here as soon as she could. No, I couldn't worry her so. Is there anyone else who could speak to him? He asked, and Loras shook his head. Never mind. Come, let's head back, Loras said, and he just nodded. They rode back slow, almost as if Loras wasn't too keen on going back. He had wondered about the relationship between Jon and Loras, wondered if they were like him, but no. It seemed Jon and Loras' sister were interested in each other. Where that left Loras he had no idea, but it made him re-examine the looks he had seen Loras give Jon. If they didn't mean what he had thought, then what did they mean? Dismounting when they got back, he tried to put it out of his mind. Even when Loras walked over to him and smiled at him, when he put his arm on his shoulder, he had tried to put it out of his mind. Loras had thanked him for listening and then walked off, and for the rest of the day, Satin had tried to put it out of his mind, only to find he could not. Was Loras like him? Did Loras like him? Casterly Rock, 294 AC, Jaime. With Tyrion away and with Daisy's pregnancy entering an even more difficult stage, he had been far busier lately than he had ever been. Had he not, then perhaps he'd have noticed it sooner, had he been able to have his morning spars rather than needing to stay with Daisy. Perhaps he'd have noticed it sooner. Not that he felt wrong for being with his wife, but he felt annoyed with himself that he hadn't noticed his king's mood. Jon had been quiet, subdued, and Jaime had written it off as him missing Marjorie. He, himself, had been similar when he and Daisy parted in the north. While Jon was perhaps still unaware of his true feeling for the girl, something Daisy disagreed with him on, he'd still miss her, still be upset she wasn't there, so he had written it off as that. It had been others who had commented on it, others who brought it to his attention, and he was annoyed with himself over that. Have you spoken to Jon much lately? Jenna asked. We speak every day. About what? Plans. About the ice trade. About bringing the Valerians and Derry into our deals. About many things, Aunt. About Jon? She asked. What? Does he speak to you about himself? About what's going on with him, Jaime? I don't understand what's going on with him. I don't know. That's the point. Speak to him, Jaime. Something's bothering him. So he had tried and been blown off, told he was fine, that everything was all right, and he had accepted it, believed it, until Arthur came to him, until Melisandre came to him, until Loras came to him, each of them telling him the same thing. Something was bothering Jon. Something was upsetting him, and whatever it was, he was telling none of them about it. So he had spoken to Walder, to Jor's, and even to Oberyn's daughter, who spent the most time around Jon and his sister, thinking it was perhaps something to do with her or the other dragon that was on his king's mind. I'd rather not say, my lord, Sorella said, and immediately his concern was raised. Why not? I'm in his confidence somewhat. If he found out I'd been speaking on him, speaking on things he did in private, my lord, I'd rather not say, she said, shaking her head. Sorella, do you think I ask this out of curiosity? I'm worried about him. Loras is worried, my aunt, Sir Arthur, Walder, and Jor's. We're all worried about him. I am too, my lord. Why? When he's not out sparring or with Joy or his lessons, when he's not speaking with you, my lord, in his room he's quiet, very quiet. He barely speaks to Rhaenys when I'm there, and not at all to Lygeron. How long? He asked, annoyed. Maul, what? How long has he been like this? More than a week, my lord. I don't know exactly. Sorella said. What else has he been doing? The candles, my lord. Free? She said softly. What about them? When I leave, he goes for them. I left some notes there and went back for them, and he was looking at them. I couldn't see, but he was looking, my lord. When she left, he walked to his room. Daisy was laying on the bed, her hand over her belly. The new maester had arrived a few days ago. Jaime's first instinct had been to send him away, only for the man to mention his name and for Jaime to breathe a little freer. Daisy seemed to like him also, and the news he gave them had both of them excited. The babe would be born within the next moon or so. How are you feeling? He said, sitting down on the bed beside her. Good for now, what's wrong? Jon, there's something going on with him. Something he's keeping from us all, me also. How long? She asked. What? He said, his mind drifting for a moment. How long has he been keeping it from you? More than a week, he said. Spar with him on the morrow. You know how he gets. Spar with him. She said, and he nodded. Do you need anything? He said, leaning forward to kiss her. I'm hungry, she said, blushing. Blame it on the cub. He said, and she laughed as he left to get her some food. High Garden, 294. AC. Willis. The girl was far smarter than he had imagined. She was naive, that was for certain. But he knew his grandmother and Marjorie would, and he could already see had started teaching her. The first time he had walked around the gardens with her, shown her High Gardens' flower beds and plants. She had walked almost dreamily beside him, almost lost and swooning over the beauty of his home. He could understand that, allow for that. He too knew how beautiful it was here. Now, though, she walked around almost more appreciative of the labyrinth, of the way the keep seemed to be beauty first, but on closer inspection, its defensive nature was clear. When he had pointed it out to her, he had expected her to dismiss it, but she had seemed pleased they were safe here. As for her direwolf, while not as large as her brothers according to her, it was still quite large. He had tried to picture Ghost in his mind and found that now Fang seemed to be his point of reference instead. He had been worried about the wolf and his hounds, more so about his hawks, but the wolf ignored them, seemed to have no interest, and it relaxed him some. Did you enjoy the feast, Sansa? He asked and saw her frown and then smile. I did, Willis, Sansa, he said, and she smirked before looking away. Not all of it. Not all of it, she said. Come, let's sit and you can tell me of it. He said, seeing the seat in front of them. One thing he most appreciated on these walks was that, given his injured leg, Sansa seemed more than happy to sit when he suggested. It also allowed for the conversation to flow more freely, he found. So what bothered you? Who said anyone bothered me? She said, and he took note of it since it was a person rather than a particular thing. Who was it, Sansa? Perhaps if you tell me I can ensure they don't come to the next one. He said, smiling at her when she laughed. All of them? She said, laughing some more. There was more than one? Aye. They were just being stupid, as if she'd ever, she said, huffing, before putting her hand to her mouth and blushing. I'm sorry. I shouldn't assume. Gossip. You have gossip, he said and moved closer to her. I love gossip. Tell me? He whispered, and she giggled. I shouldn't. Sansa, he said, and looked at her. Marjorie. All those boys asking her to dance, all thinking she'd want to dance with them, as if she would. Progeny, Sansa said, and Willis looked at her, wondering if that was it. Was it a simple case of jealousy? I'm sure some asked you too, he said, and she looked at him. What? Oh, they did. I don't mind them asking me, but I know Marjorie didn't wish to dance with them or listen to them speak to her. I saw it with the king's brother, Lord Renly. I know Marjorie didn't wish to dance with him and the others. They're just stupid boys. Marjorie doesn't like any of them. Ch, she said. And Willis was at a loss. What did she mean? Stupid boys. What was she thinking? It took him a few moments to realize it, to figure it out, and when he did, he smiled. It was true then. Marjorie felt something for Jon too, just as his grandmother had said. He looked back to Sansa, and then to Fang, who was sitting there watching them both carefully. Wolves, he thought to himself. Well then, we'll have to ensure they don't annoy my sister next time, then won't we? He said. And Sansa smiled broadly. A few days later, after another of their walks, he found himself summoned to his grandmother's solar, surprised to see her look so annoyed since his father was away, and he was usually the cause. Garland had accompanied his father and mother to a celebration at Leonette's, and so, unless something had happened there, which was unlikely, this could, or at least seemed to be far more serious. Grandmother? He asked, sitting down. Lying was, read, she said, handing him a note. A trout wishes to travel among the roses, bringing news of the union of a stag and wolf. I don't understand. He said, knowing some of it, but some not making sense to him. Sansa's mother will be visiting us soon, it seems. Given that she's coming from King's Landing, she's agreed to betroth her daughter and the prince. His grandmother said, but she couldn't have. Sansa is far too young, besides Lord Stark, he said, his voice concerned. Doesn't know, I'd wager, but still, she'll fill her head with tales of the Prince Willis. It is up to us to fill her head with tales of the truth. How? Marjorie. We need to involve Marjorie. Would it not be better if the king spoke to her himself, grandmother? It would, but he'll do it in person. Willis. Jon wouldn't have it any other way. His grandmother said her fondness for Jon Snow clear in her expression. What of Lady Catelyn? We'll welcome her with all the courtesy she is due. Grandmother, he said chidingly, I'm not who Lady Catelyn should worry about here, Willis. Marjorie, he said, you think my thorns will hurt a trout. Wait and see what happens, should she dare disparage Jon in your sister's presence. King's Landing, 294 AC, Cat. She had almost walked on air after speaking to the king. Petter too seemed overjoyed for her. Sansa was to be queen. It was everything she wished for, everything she had ever hoped for, her daughter. She wished her father had lived to see it come to be, to even know the betrothal was secured, to know that his granddaughter would be queen. He'd have been so proud of her, so proud of them both. But Jon Arryn had surprisingly been, if not against the idea, certainly trying to steer her away from the match. She had been stunned until Peter had explained it, until he had set her straight. Jon loves your husband, Cat, more so perhaps even than Robert. Then should he not be thankful, happy even for the match? She asked. Perhaps, but if we're right about Jon Snow, if we are even close to the truth about your husband, no, Peter, I'll not believe it. Ned would never. He may care for the boy, but I don't believe he'd plan against our own children. Why wouldn't he just announce it if that was his plan? Because your family wouldn't stand for it. Kat and Lysa would support you too. Should he just disinherit your line? Then there would be cause, reason enough to rise against him. But should he think like a bastard? And given what the bastard had done, how he'd ingratiated himself with their bannermen, yes, if that happened, Ned could claim he had no choice. If they rose against him then, they'd look like the ones usurping, not the bastard. But still, she couldn't fathom it. Couldn't even consider it, could she? I still don't see it better. Why would Jon tell me Joffrey is a monster? A cruel boy who treats Sansa dishonorably and hurtfully? With Sansa tied to the crown, Cat, then the bastard is no threat. How could he be? Even with the Lannisters behind him, he couldn't go against the crown, and Sansa would never allow him to usurp her brother, would she? Would she, though? She seemed closer to the bastard than to Robb while he was there, happier in the bastard's company than that of her own true-born brother. She would have to speak to her, talk to her, and set her straight on the true nature of her bastard brother, of what he truly wished for. Though it had never taken before, but this time she'd be bringing her news of the prince, of her future. This time it would it not? Thank you, Patir. I'd be lost without you, she said, and he smiled at her and kissed her cheek. It took her another few days to find out from Lisa that everything Peter said about Jon was true. Everything she had suspected, it seemed to be happening. Had she not come here, had she not realized the true depths of the bastard's plan, she shuddered thinking on it. My husband is against this match. Cat, Lysa said, and she looked around the room before moving closer. I believe if he could, he'd talk the king out of it. Have him marry the prince to someone else, but Robert is determined to marry Joffrey to Sansa. Why, Lysa? Why is he against it so? I don't know, Cat. I wish I did. All I can say is he came back from his solo the other day cursing the king for making the match. Cat felt there had to be another reason. There had to be something else going on. Surely Jon Arryn wasn't on the bastard's side. Edmure said he had been furious with him. He had wanted his hand as badly as Edmure had. Surely even his love for her husband wouldn't bring him to support the bastard after that. She couldn't make sense of it. Edmure, I don't understand. Why would he wish for this? Why would Jon be so against the match? Coin, Cat. Coin. Coin? Apparently the crown is in need of it. Perhaps Jon Arryn sees the bastard's connection to the Lannisters as a way to gain their coin? He would see my children ruined for coin? I do not know, Cat. I find it most strange that he's not happy for this. The daughter of one of his foster sons marrying the son of the other. I'd have thought him overjoyed. What of the prince? She asked. A boy, Cat. We were all young once. Am I the same boy you grew up with? Are you the same girl? No, I'm not, she said, smiling as she thought of it. She was very different now to how she had once been. A few days before she was ready to head to Highgarden, Edmure left to go back to Riverrun. Cat spent her time mostly with Petter, enjoying eating with him, even dancing once, though only once. It was the next morning that she met the prince, seeing him arguing in the hall with some servants. Behind him, the Kingsguard looked incredible in his shiny armor and white cloak, but the prince in his golden doublet, his blonde hair and green eyes outshone him. He was a handsome young boy and would grow into a very handsome man. Exactly what her daughter would deserve, she thought as she looked at him. My prince, she said, curtsying when he turned to look at her. Who are you? He asked, looking at her oddly. Lady Catelyn Stark, my prince. Age, Lady Stark. My father told me you were here. It's a pleasure to meet you, he said, kissing her offered hand. You too, my prince, she said, smiling. Are you still here? Be gone. Go, and don't show your face around here again, or it'll be more than my boot you'll feel, Joffrey said, looking at the servant girl before turning to her. Forgive me, my lady, but these people, they take advantage. Of course, my prince. You are right to put them in their place, she said, and didn't notice the roll of the eyes the Kingsguard gave her. I must beg my leave, my lady. Perhaps we can speak again, he said, and she bid him farewell. She only saw him once more before she readied to leave. He was riding his horse, looking so elegant as he sat on its back, so much like what a future king should. The horse, though, was moving erratically, and she worried so for his safety. But he hit it more than once with the whip he carried, and eventually it and she calmed down. Had she looked closer, she'd have seen the blood on the horse's side, seen the marks from where his spiked spurs had dug into the horse's flesh. Petter helped her into her carriage when she was ready to leave. She was actually in some ways sorry to be going, though she knew where she was heading to was important. She had to speak to Sansa, which meant her journey home would be far longer than she had expected, but thankfully, Peter had sent a raven back to Winterfell for her. "Thank you, Petter, for everything," she said, smiling at him as he kissed her hand. "For you, Cat, I'd do anything, you know this." "I do, Petyr, and I'm most grateful for it," she said as he closed the door. His man had already headed off to the west. Perhaps even by the time she got to Highgarden it would be done, and Jon Snow would be no longer in her life. She felt relieved as the carriage took off. She would protect her family. She would ensure their future, ensure Robb and Sansa, Bran, and Arya got what they deserved, as would Jon Snow. Casterly Rock, 294 AC, Tom. He looked at the bronze dragon angrily as he had for days on end. He refused to speak to him, refused to speak to Rhaenys. Instead, Lygaron simply said it was time, that he needed to know the truth. Who decided it was time? Why they had decided it? His dragon refused to say not even his sister's anger was enough, only that it was time, that he needed to know. Rhaenys worried about him and tried to comfort him, but it was to no avail. Nothing she could say, nothing she could offer would make him feel any better about this. Just knowing it, just knowing this truth was like a weight he carried with him every day. It affected his sparring, his moods, his conversation. Every time he saw a Lannister, he wanted to run away, wanted to hide, lest they figure it out from how he looked at them. "Jay, you can't keep this to yourself. You're not eating, not sleeping right. You need to speak to someone," Rhaenys said, and he looked to his sister. Who can I speak to on this?" "I can't tell Arya, I can't, not this. I can't tell them this," he said, shaking his head. "Do they have to know? Can you just keep it to yourself?" she asked, and he heard the bronze dragon's chirps before his sister turned on him. "You have caused enough problems. You don't get an opinion on this," she said angrily to Lygaron. He drowned out the noise as the two dragons chirped at each other. He didn't need this, didn't want this. He wished he could just wipe it from his mind. "What do you mean, he's your rider?" Rhaenys said loudly, and Jon turned to look at both dragons. They were standing not more than a few inches from each other, face to face, Lygaron on the table while Rhaenys was on a chair a bit lower than him. "Jay," he says. "Tyrion. Tyrion is his rider, just like you are mine," she said, looking to him. "I don't care. No one cares. No one will care. You think they'll give a damn about Tyrion being a dragon rider when they find this out? You think Tyrion will?" he said angrily to Lygaron while Rhaenys looked on. "We could have bonded him differently. I could have claimed it in another way. Not this. Never this." Jon did what he had been doing for the last few days then. Moving to the glass candles, he tried to get them to work, tried to see if there was more, if there was a reason, an excuse, an explanation. But while they'd burn for him, they'd show him nothing, tell him nothing, leaving him with the truth of what he'd seen in his head, leaving him with knowing what it would mean should the truth be known. His days were spent in somewhat of a daze. He went to lessons and barely concentrated, went to spas or spent time with his friends, but was barely there. Knowing that Tyrion was his uncle, was his family, should have brought him some comfort, some joy. He had lost so many. To gain a new family member should have meant something, but the cost was too high, the price far too steep. He would gain an uncle. The Lannisters shouldn't need to lose a brother, a nephew, a cousin for him to do so. "Should we take the dragons out, Jon?" He heard Sorella ask him, and he nodded, even though he couldn't even remember when the girl had arrived. They walked out into the cove. he carrying Lygaron but barely looking at the bronze dragon, Rhaenys flying ahead of him, almost too big to be carried by anyone other than Walder now. He, Arthur, and Jors stood watching the dragons as they took to the sky, both dropping into the water, but only Rhaenys returning with a fish, Lygaron seemingly only doing so for show. He knew. He could feel the bronze's own upset, its own concern for him, but he found it hard to forgive him, hard to come to terms with what he'd done, so he had been distant and would stay so, refusing to allow Lygaron to speak to him, even on the occasions the bronze had tried to. Jon could see the concern in Arthur's eyes. In Jors's too. Walder had come right out and asked him what was wrong, but he couldn't even begin to tell them. Dinner that night was a quiet affair. They would still eat in the family wing, still meet up and join for their meals. Satin had become part of their group now, eating with them, training with them. Jon was glad for him as he knew it in some way made up for his own absences. Joy was really the one person he found he could be with and not pretend as much, not worry about as much, the one person who could still get a true smile from him. Jon, story. Already you haven't even had your dessert, Joy? Dessert yucky, Jon. No strawberries, she said, shaking her head annoyed. No strawberries. Why no strawberries? He said as if the mere thought of it caused him distress. Auntie said I was bad, Jon. No lessons, no apples, no strawberries, Joy said, shaking her head. How about we go for our story and see if we can find some strawberries along the way, he said, and she smiled broadly. No, tell Auntie, Jon, she whispered and giggled. No, tell Auntie, Joy, he said, and took her hand. He knew she was just trying her best to cheer him up, to make him laugh, playing her games and making up the fact she was being punished for something. He had seen her deep in conversation with Cregan, with Jenna, even with Loras. A part of him felt upset it was that clear to people, while another just loved the girl even more, just went along with it and allowed her to raise his spirits, as she always did. It had gone on for almost 2 weeks when Jaime came to him. He had found warging into ghosts, allowed him to almost forget. Warging into birds allowed him to fly and leave his worries far behind. But they were temporary solutions at best. So when Jaime came to him and asked him to spar with him on the morrow, he agreed and then panicked once he had left. Jay, what is it? Rhaenys asked. Jaime, he's trying to figure out what's on my mind, he said. And his sister was quiet. Ray? Perhaps it's for the best, Jay. Perhaps it's what's needed, she said. And while he agreed, it didn't make him feel better. He needed to speak to someone, talk to someone. But who? One of his Kingsguard, Loras, Melisandre, would they understand? Would they be the right people to speak to on this? He felt not. They'd listen. They'd perhaps offer him advice, but as close to them as he was, they weren't family. And he felt he needed family. He needed someone. He needed Marjorie. In the end, he settled for the only other family he had here, making his way to Cregan's rooms. He was glad his cousin was already asleep. It was his mother he needed to see, his aunt. He found her reading alone, as she did most nights. She was glad for his company. He could see that, but given what he was about to say to her, he wondered how long that would last. Jon, what brings you here to my humble abode? She said with a smile. Aunt, he began. And she looked at him, placing her hand on his shoulder. Come on, Jon, come inside, she said softly, and he did. How are you settling an aunt? He asked, and she smiled at him. I prefer it here, rather than in the guest wing. It's a bit of a chore going up for the lessons, but here, we don't need to hide who we are, worry about servants overhearing or someone looking in our rooms. Someone looked in your room? He asked, surprised, and a little shocked someone would do so. What? No, it's more a worry, one which I don't have now. she said, and he nodded. What's on your mind, John? As happy as I am you've come to see me, you're not one for just popping in unannounced. I found out something about my grandfather. Something terrible, something horrible, and I don't know what to do with it. About it, I don't know if I need to speak on it, or if I should try and bury it deep in my heart, he said, and she looked at him. Your grandfather was a terrible man, John. You know this. I know you do. But perhaps you don't really know just how terrible he was. Do you know what he said when he saw your sister the first time? She smells Dornish to me. It was the same thing he said when he first met Elia, but to say it, meeting his first grandchild. She said, shaking her head, he was a little better when he met Aegon, but only a little. Did he ever? Did he ever try to do anything? To you? He said, his voice shaky, and he saw it then. Saw that she knew what he did about his grandfather's activities. Grabbing him in a hug, she held him tight. No, John, he didn't. He wouldn't have dared, she said, and he felt some relief. I saw him, he said softly. Saw him with someone who wasn't my grandmother. Someone he forced. I don't know what to do, don't know what to say. And was glad she wouldn't let him go. They stayed quietly like that for a few moments, neither of them speaking, and he was glad of it, glad of the silence, the not having to say more, the not needing to speak until he was ready to do so. When he did tell her everything, he saw the concern in her eyes for him, and he thanked the gods for her, for family, for having more, and for having them here when he needed them most. I wish I could tell you what to do, John. Could tell you to speak on it or bury it. But you already know, coming here, you know what you need to do. You've already decided. It's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt him, he said. And he wasn't sure whether it was Tyrion or Jaime he was speaking of. He's still their kin. John, still Jaime's brother. Were you not still Sansa's, still Rob's and Brandon's and Arya's? Did you feel any differently even though their mother was not your own? She asked, and he looked to her. No, I didn't, he said. What about when you found out the truth, John? When you found out who you really were? Is Sansa less your sister now? Are the others not your siblings still? She said, and he nodded. Leaving the room later that night, he felt better. It was still bearing down on him, still a weight on his chest, but he felt better. Arriving back at his own room, he found Rhaenys and Lygaron were still awake, obviously worried about him. He spoke to them both. The bronze dragon happy to hear his voice directed at him. He felt him in his head, felt him looking for him, and allowed the connection to be made. I'm sorry, Father. I'm sorry, the bronze said. Why, Lygaron? Oh, the gods, Father. The old gods wanted you to know. They said you needed to know. You talked to them. He asked and heard Rhaenys' voice in the background asking the same thing. I am connected to them, Father. I am your connection to them, Lygaron said. That night he found himself walking in a glade, surrounded by trees, a circle of weirwoods. He felt the presence then, the power in the place. Moving around, he saw the water in the distance, looked up and saw his dragons in the sky, Rhaenys bigger than he could ever imagine, Lygaron flying with a figure on his back. He moved to the trees, and a man walked out from behind the largest of them. He had dark green skin and horns on his head. Beside him walked a child. No, not a child. This was one of the children. He looked at the two and saw both were smiling, beckoning him forward. As he began to move closer, he heard a voice boom loudly in the air. Long have we waited for you, my prince, but now is not the time. You will come to us. We will show you the path, but not yet, not yet. He was in a room he recognized, the throne ahead of him. Standing beside it was Tyrion, dressed in black and red. To his left, a silver-haired woman wearing identical colors, and sitting on the throne itself, a dark-haired man. The scar on his face identifying him clearly, as if Jon needed such a thing to recognize himself. "The dragon must have 3 heads," Jon said as he stood up from the throne and took Tyrion and the woman's hands in his own, "or all is lost."